Hey, and
Hey,
welcome to Marriage Minutes at its Pace. And today we're going to talk about the rhythm of marriage. And how we came about this topic was our daughter is a swimmer. She swims 100 breaststroke. And so, in evaluating her, she kind of stated that her stroke is off, the rhythm is not there. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And so I started doing some research trying to figure out how do you get back in rhythm. And then within our household, and how does this relate to marriage? Uh, Sometimes as you go and you go and you do, and you're doing the daily grind in and out, sometimes your marriage loses its rhythm. And so Ron was like, dude, we can't keep doing this. And so sometimes you don't really realize it, but there's a rhythm to how you operate. And so, how do you get your rhythm back? And so it really made sense as I was listening to one of Ron's favorite pastors.
Shout out to Pastor Keith Battle. Thank you for your efforts and diligence in the word.
Yes. And he was talking about, like, for track stars who run hurdles, there's a certain rhythm. It's tap, 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 go, tap, 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 hurdle. And so if you don't have the rhythm, then you're going to fall and crash. And so, in relations to marriage, when we realized that our rhythm wasn't right and there was just something not right, we had to kind of stop and halt and figure out how do we get back in rhythm. And so, what we did, it was just like we just sat down and had a conversation of where we were and took an inventory of the things that we were doing that may not be important, but it was just part of the daily grind. And so by us stopping, it allowed us to rest, but then at the same time, it allowed us to, okay, let's go. And then we were able to put some things in place that allow us to be on the same page and to be in rhythm. What's your thoughts?
I don't want to say anything. The only thing that comes to mind when Mark was talking about rhythm and trying to get back into rhythm, if you've lost it, is that you first have to think about two things. You have to think about humility and have to think about responsibility, because both of you all have played a role in the reason why your rhythm is off. Let's go back to the breaststroke. So Erin has to move her arms at a certain time, and she has to she has to whip her legs. It's a frog leg kick kind of thing. She has to do that in sequence. And in order for her to ever think about her rhythm getting back to rhythm, does rhythm get off? I don't know. But her body and her mind, most importantly, have to think about and get in order. And I think that takes humility. So in a relationship, two people play a part in a rhythm being off. And so humility says, what am I doing or not doing to make this work? What was I doing that I stopped? What was I doing that didn't help the situation? And so I have to be humble enough to recognize my own what I brought to the table to get the rhythm off. And then responsibility says, okay, now that I know that it is me, I am the one who I used to, this is not us, I used to fix my husband's plate at every meal, and I stopped doing that. So, because I said it's not us. So, if that's something that I did before and it was something that worked, then I have to admit that I stopped doing it and I have to take the responsibility to do it again. That's a silly thing, but really, like my aunt told me several years ago, don't start anything in your relationship that you are not going to continue to do extend for the life longevity of your relationship. So those are two things that I have to say. You have to recognize your role and then take responsibility for it so that the rhythm to the breaststroke can get back off. That's all I got.
And I think one of the two, somebody has to realize that it's out of rhythm. And you can't, if you see it, somebody has to be the bigger person to say, okay, we need to stop. Because otherwise, the both of you are going to keep dancing like Elaine in Seinfeld when she does the crazy dance, and it looks ugly. And so there's nothing rhythmic.
That's ugly.
Well, there's nothing rhythmic that we think of that dance. And so it's important, like you said, just to humility, responsibility, stop, and just take a inventory of where you are and get back in sync. So
I do want to add to that. So humility, responsibility can be something that an individual takes ownership of, but the third part of that to make all of this rhythm work is that you've got to decide to be intentional to sync it back up. So I could be doing all these things and I could be figuring out all these things and he could be figuring out all his own things, but we never pull the system together. And the last thing that I'll say about that, to pull the system together, is that more than likely, if your rhythm is off, you are not praying together. And you cannot do this thing without the presence of God in your life. Marriage is a trinity. Marriage is a trinity. God, husband, and wife. And so, yes, be humble. Yes, take responsibility. But lastly, invite God back into the situation, into your relationship, and see what he does for your rhythm. I bet you he'll get that breaststroke back together.
and when you get your rhythm, you get your rhythm.
Uh-oh.
Be well and be blessed.